Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today with our next episode in Tween Storytime. Now, last week we mixed things up a bit, where we stopped reading our first book, The Graveyard Book, and we started reading a new book in honor of the summer reading program starting. Last week we read chapters 1 through 3 in The Castle in the Attic by Elizabeth Winthrop. Now, in chapters 1 through 3, we met the main characters of the story. So we had William, the boy who the story is about, Mrs. Phillips, his caretaker, who's been with his family for 10 years, but is now decided that she's going to move home to England to be closer to her family, and William is pretty upset about it. So as her going away present, Mrs. Phillips gives William the big castle that has been in her family for years. So it is a castle toy that has lots of moving parts and you can lift off the roof to look inside. It's pretty sweet. And along with that comes the lead knight that has been passed down in her family for generations. Just like her family tradition says, Mrs. Phillips tells William to meet the Silver Knight alone, and when William does, late at night, the Silver Knight actually comes to life. So today we'll continue with chapter 4, seeing if William did in fact dream the Silver Knight being alive, or if he's really under a magic spell. So let's get started. The Castle in the Attic by Elizabeth Winthrop, chapter 4. Mrs. Phillips liked to sleep late in the mornings and brew her tea using the electric kettle in her bedroom, so William always ate breakfast with his parents. "What are you doing in science now, William?" his father asked. "We just started using microscopes. It's boring because Mrs. Phillips and I have been doing it for ages. Right now we're looking at frogs' eggs." "What about history?" said his mother as she stirred her coffee. "Still on the Spanish settlers?" "Nope. The Southwest Indians. I have to write a paper on how to build an adobe house." "Maybe your father could help you. He spent some time in Arizona." "I was 15 at the time, Anne," his father said, "and those were the days when I wanted to be a movie star, so I didn't pay much attention to the local architecture." He winked at William. William pushed his soggy cereal around in the bowl. He had to get the spotlight off himself so he could scrounge some food for the Silver Knight. "How's your work, Dad?" "Jim Harrison and I walked over the site for their new house yesterday. It should be an exciting project because of the topography of the land." "Really?" his mother asked. "I would have thought that the land behind the school was very flat." While they talked about the Harrisons' house, William slid a piece of toast and half a slice of bacon into his napkin and tucked them up his shirt sleeve. "May I be excused?" he asked. "I promised Jason I'd meet him early to go over some homework." William's face grew red the way it always did when he tried to lie, but his parents were too busy talking to notice. Anyway, Jason usually got to school early, so William only told half a lie. "Certainly, dear," his mother said with a vague smile. "Be careful riding home on your bike this afternoon." She said the same thing every day. "See you tonight," said William as he headed up the stairs. "Sir Simon," William called softly, "I've brought your breakfast." There was no answer. He waited for a minute, half expecting to hear the clank of the small man's metal shoes on the stone staircase. "I'll leave it for you in the kitchen. See you later." William crumbled up the bacon and half the toast and piled it on the kitchen table. "Maybe I did dream the whole thing," he muttered to himself as he wheeled his bike out of the garage. Jason was waiting for him in the front hall. He and Jason had been best friends ever since first grade. William was the shortest kid in the class, and Jason wore thick glasses, so they were usually the brunt of everybody's jokes. Hanging out together had helped them develop tough skins and deaf ears. They walked up to the classroom. As usual, they had it to themselves for a few minutes. Nobody else in their class ever got to school early. "You're late today." "My parents were asking me the usual questions. How's school? How's science? How's history? How's life?" "You're lucky," Jason said. "My parents never ask me anything." "That's because your mother's home when you get there in the afternoon. She doesn't think she has to concentrate on you the way my mother does." "Yes, she does. She just concentrates on the wrong things. Like, have I practiced the piano and did I put out the garbage? That's why I spend half my life over at your house. Listen, did Mrs. Phillips change her mind about leaving yet?" Jason asked. "No," William said, "but she brought the present she promised me." I forgot all about that. What is it? A castle, William said. A castle? William nodded. It's got 4 towers and a complete gatehouse and a chapel and a roof that lifts right off so you can see inside the bedrooms on the 2nd floor. Can I come over this afternoon and see it? William didn't say anything for a moment. He hadn't decided yet whether or not to tell Jason about the Silver Knight. The other kids were filing into the classroom. "Find your seats, please," the teacher said as he closed the door behind him. "Can I?" Jason whispered. "Not today, okay? I have to go to a special gymnastics practice," William lied. "Maybe tomorrow." The day seemed to drag by. The Silver Knight stayed in the back of William's mind all afternoon, and the teacher had to remind him twice to pay attention. By the time he left school, he had convinced himself that his adventures the night before were just a dream. "You're home early," Mrs. Phillips said. She was down on her knees by the flagstone walk in the front yard. "What are you doing?" William asked. "Turning over the soil for the border annuals. If the weather stays this warm, I'll be able to get the plants in before I leave." She started to get up. "I don't need a snack today," he said quickly. "You can finish what you're doing." "But I thought we had to practice the back handsprings. I was going to spot you today. I want to play with the castle for a while. I'll be down soon." "All right," she said. She went back to her digging, and he stopped at the kitchen door to glance at her. The curve of her back, the way her white hair fell down across her cheek, her crisscrossing garden shoes tucked neatly under her skirt. Everything about her made him feel safe and happy. He grabbed an apple from the bowl on the kitchen table and went up to the attic, turning over and discarding his various plans for making her change her mind about leaving. None of them seemed right. He knew he had to do something soon. He was so distracted by these thoughts that he almost tripped over the castle. "Young man, hold up, hold up!" cried the Silver Knight, who was standing on the wall walk, waving frantically at William's knee. "Sorry," William said, dropping down beside him. "I was thinking about something. I didn't see you." Sir Simon looked indignant at the thought that anyone could forget about him. "In your world, sir, I may be small, but in my own I am known as a man to be reckoned with." "I'm sure of that, Sir Simon," William replied quickly. Working his penknife out of his front pocket, he chopped a slice of apple into tiny chunks and put them down on the battlements of the wall. It didn't seem proper to put a knight's food on the floor. "I brought you something to eat," he said. "I'll bring you more after dinner." Sir Simon ate quickly, spearing each piece of apple with his dagger. William lowered the drawbridge, and the knight joined him at the top of the attic stairs, glancing cautiously about him as he scrambled across the wide planks of the floor. William lifted him carefully up onto a trunk that had been pushed against the wall. "To defend yourself against any unseen enemy, you should always keep a wall at your back," Sir Simon remarked as he settled into a comfortable sitting position. "If you don't mind, sir, I want to know where you came from and how you got here," William said. "I thought you would have some questions when you returned, young man. I cannot answer them all." "Can you tell me what you do know, then?" William asked. "Certainly. I hope you are comfortable, because this tale will take me some little while to tell." William nodded. "Please start." "Very well, then. I was the only son of my father, Lord Aquila, a noble and powerful knight who was, at the end of his life, a very sick man. He contracted an unknown disease that caused his limbs to weaken and shake, so that for days at a time he would take to his bed. We called in respected doctors from all over the land, and even from across the sea. They did no good, although they charged high fees. It cost us dearly to board their servants and stable their horses while they took their time considering the matter of the disease and conferring with one another." At this point, the knight, clearly upset, got to his feet and began pacing back and forth. William was worried that he might fall off the edge of his lookout. But after a while, he grew calmer and sat down again. "At that time," Sir Simon went on, "there was a wizard in my father's kingdom by the name of Alistair. Some months before my father grew ill, this man had arrived at the castle one morning, seeking employment, and my father had taken pity on him. He was a raggle-taggle sort when he first appeared. His robe was torn and dusty, and he talked of having travelled long distances and having suffered much. From the beginning, I was more suspicious of his story than my father, and pressed Alistair for details. He gave none. At first, Alistair seemed perfectly harmless. He was given a room down near the kitchen where he sometimes invited me to help him mix up potions and salves that were supposed to straighten crooked bones and settle upset stomachs. He had a wardrobe in the room that he always kept locked, and I noticed he was careful never to open it when I was there. The more I saw of Alistair, the less I really knew him. He was a man of secrets, some of which he told me, but more often I heard tales of the wrongs that had been done to him. The stories were garbled, and I didn't pay much attention to the details, but I sensed even then his desperate need to control people, to have power. Let me give you an example. Around his neck, the wizard wore a length of woven ribbon from which dangled 3 medals, or tokens. Once, early on in our acquaintance, when he still trusted me, he pulled that necklace out of his robe and showed it to me. In the middle hung a small flat disc made out of lead. At that time I did not find it particularly interesting. I know better now. Hanging from the ribbon, on either side of the disc, there were 2 halves of one medal that showed the 2 faces of Janice. They had hinges, and Alistair told me that they could be fitted together when necessary, but he preferred to use them separately. "The word January comes from Janice, doesn't it?" William asked. "Precisely," Sir Simon said. "I see your education has not been entirely neglected. Janice guards the gates of heaven and looks both ways in time. But the image of Janice on Alistair's necklace had an evil magical power. One half of the token made things small, and the other restored them to their normal size. The symbols beside Janice's head on each surface were different. The side that made things small showed 2 staffs, the instruments of punishments. The other side showed 2 keys. I saw him work this magic on a rat. When he pointed the staff side, the rat shrank to the size of a toy. When he used the side with the keys, the rat returned to normal. I am convinced that most of Alistair's magic lay in that necklace, but I never learned much more about it, because after a while he grew secretive around me. Meanwhile, my father got steadily worse. The doctors were totally mystified. I suppose I was the one who thought of asking Alistair for help, though now I curse myself for that idea. He came and sat by my father's bed, asking about the symptoms and making a long list in some strange language. The next day, the wizard began administering an evil-smelling potion to my father, who took it reluctantly, as the taste was as bad as the odor. To our amazement, he appeared to get better. The palsy seemed less violent, and my father had long periods of peace when he could rest. It was not until much later that I realized the drug that helped him sleep was also slowly poisoning him. Alistair was hailed as a genius by all of us, and my father insisted that the wizard be given a large bedroom right next to his own. To everyone's relief, the doctors were bundled off to wherever they had come from. My father became quieter with every passing day, and he slept a good deal. When he was awake, he insisted that Alistair stay near him, for he felt the wizard was responsible for his recovery. I often came in to find them deep in conversation, and my father began to grow suspicious of me and of his own trusted counselors. Alistair was poisoning his mind and his body at the same time. William's legs were beginning to ache, so he shifted position. "I'm taking too long to tell this story," Sir Simon said quickly. "I will hurry. Just days before my father died, he issued various edicts through Alistair. In these, the counselors were sent on missions to neighboring kingdoms. They objected, knowing my father was near death. It meant that they would have to return to the kingdom through the forest. Alistair had put some sort of spell on the forest to protect our kingdom from attack, and we knew the counselors would not be able to get back through. We were convinced Alistair controlled my father's every action, but my father would not even see us to listen to our arguments. Alistair had moved his pallet into my father's room, and he even ate his meals there. The counselors had no choice but to leave, and after that, my only friend in the castle was my old nurse, Calendar, who had been with me since birth. She and I sat up late into the night discussing plans for defeating Alistair, but they came to nothing. My father died at last, and if there is anything I can thank Alistair for, it is that he went peacefully and without pain. But I can never forgive Alistair for turning my father against me. At the end, he would not speak to me at all, saying that I had been a traitor to him and to our kingdom. Sir Simon stopped speaking and covered his face for a moment. Then he went on. The day after the funeral, Alistair came to my room and showed me a paper that my father had signed before he died. It proclaimed that Alistair was to succeed my father, and I was not fit to rule. Calendar was with me at the time. I was dressed in a full suit of armor, as I was about to review the guard. I ripped the paper to shreds, and the two of us attacked the wizard. Alistair pulled the necklace from under his robe, pointed the lead disc at me, and mumbled a word. I reached up and snatched at the necklace, which fell off his neck. One half of the Janice medal came away in my hand. He lunged at me and tried to get it back, but I curled my fingers around it and held on. Calendar was trying to pull him off me, but I could not help her because by that time, Alistair's spell had begun to work. The bottom of half of me had already turned to lead. I could not move my feet or bend my knees. The knight shuddered, remembering that moment. It was horrible. I cried out to Calendar, but she was no longer struggling with the wizard. They were both watching me, he with a terrible smile on his face, and Calendar. The knight stopped speaking for a moment, as if he were trying to work out something in his mind. I realize now that Calendar deserted me in the end. It was too late to save me, and she must have known she would be left behind with the wizard. At the very last moment, as my face was growing smooth and cold, Alistair flipped the lead disc and pointed the other side at me. Then everything went black, and the next thing I saw was you. So, the other side of the lead disc made you small? William asked. No, it must have sent me here. I am not small in my own country, young man, only in yours. The Silver Knight patted the pouch that hung from his belt. This is the weapon that makes things small, the token I stole from Alistair. How do you know it still works? Why, I had not thought of that, said the Silver Knight, pulling apart the drawstrings of his pouch. I suppose we had better test it out on something. William glanced around him. Here, try this, he said, placing an old pincushion on the ledge in front of the knight. Sir Simon extended both arms, and, holding the token before him like a shield, he pointed it directly at the pincushion. Nothing happened. I remember Alistair muttered something when he used it on the rat, the knight said. Try the word small, William suggested. Small, said Sir Simon. The pincushion remained the same. They tried 5 or 6 other words, but nothing happened. Perhaps it only works on living things, Sir Simon said. He glanced up at William thoughtfully. Oh, no you don't, William said, standing up. You can't try it on me because you couldn't make me big again. There's nobody to bring you food, and you'd be in trouble when Mrs. Phillips came looking for me. It was only an idea, my dear sir. Do not alarm yourself, Sir Simon said. But how else will we know if it works? I know. I'll bring you a bug or something tomorrow. Suddenly, the attic door opened below. William, Mrs. Phillips said, I've been calling you. It's dinner time. William reached down and scooped up Sir Simon so that the knight was safely hidden in his hand by the time Mrs. Phillips started up the stairs. I'm coming, he said quickly. Mrs. Phillips stopped at the tone in his voice and gazed up at him. Everything all right? She asked. Yes, just fine, he said as casually as he could. I'll be there in a minute. He could feel Sir Simon squirming inside his hand, so he loosened his hold enough to give the little man some air. All right, then, she said as she headed back down the stairs. Don't forget, you've still got your homework to do, and we haven't practiced the back handspring in 2 days. That was close, William said as he set Sir Simon on the wall walk. The knight was gasping for air, and some minutes went by before he was able to speak. My dear sir, more gently, if you please. I am no longer made of lead. Sorry, it had to be quick, William explained. Listen, if you ever hear the attic door open and I knock 3 times on the wall, that means you must hide quickly, because somebody is with me. The knight nodded. "See you later when I bring up your dinner." "Until then," Sir Simon said weakly. "I'll catch a bug tomorrow," William added as he went down the stairs. Chapter 5. William managed to sneak an entire miniature meal upstairs after dinner. He didn't hang around to talk with the knight because he still had history homework to do. He left Sir Simon digging enthusiastically into his bits of ham and baked potato. William had even found a top from an empty vanilla bottle and filled it with milk for the knight to drink. The next day, Jason bugged him again about the castle. "Come on, William. After all the stuff you've told me about it, I want to see it," Jason complained. "All right, you can come home and see it today, but you have to go to gymnastics practice with me first," William said. "I thought you had practice yesterday." William looked away. "We have a big meet next month. The coach is really pushing us." "Sure, I'll come," Jason said. "It's more fun than practicing the piano." The other members of the team were already on the floor warming up when they arrived. "Hey, Lawrence, you're late." Robert, the coach, never let them get away with anything. "Sorry, can my friend watch if he stays out of the way?" "Sure. We're starting with floor work today. After you warm up, I want to see a round off and then 2 back handsprings. Are you going to spot me?" "The first time. Then you're going to try it on your own. We still have to add the Arabian dive roll. The meet is exactly 1 month from today." Despite all the time and energy it took, William loved gymnastics. It was the only part of his life where having a small, wiry body really paid off. His moves were faster and more graceful than everyone else's, which improved the team's scores at the meets. But it also meant Robert was tougher on him. "Stay here, William. I want you to try it again. The rest of the group can start work on the parallel bars." Robert walked across the room and put both hands on William's shoulders. "Remember, the back handsprings create the momentum and speed that you need for the dive roll. Focus on your shoulders. They will do the job of transferring the energy from your arms to the rest of your body." William plodded wearily back to the corner. This was the 5th time in a row. His arms and shoulders ached. He stopped in the corner and closed his eyes for a moment. Nobody spoke. He made himself forget about Jason waiting in the corner, about the silver knight waiting in the castle, about Robert's frown. He had to get the rhythm, the push, the sense of space from inside himself. 1 step, and he started off with a powerful run, then did the round off and 2 tight handsprings. It was better. He knew that. Robert nodded. "Join the rest of the group at the bars now." "He really pushes you," Jason said on the way home. "Doesn't it get to you?" William nodded. "Sometimes, but he's a good coach, and he's usually right." "The first 4 looked okay to me," Jason said. "I was crooked. I could feel it, and any judge would see it, just like when you miss a note on the piano." Jason nodded. "You look tired," Mrs. Phillips said as they collapsed into the kitchen chairs. "Bad day at school?" "Robert made me do the first part of my routine 5 times in a row," William said. "Let's not talk about it." Mrs. Phillips put out another cup of juice and 2 cookies for Jason. When she turned back to the sink, William slipped a cookie into his napkin. Jason saw him, but didn't say anything. "I'll be in the front turning over the other half of the flower bed," Mrs. Phillips said. "What are you boys up to?" "William's going to show me the castle," Jason offered. "Is it true you gave it to him to keep forever?" Mrs. Phillips glanced over at William. "Forever," she said, "if he wants it that long." "Come on, Jason," William muttered. "I bet she's sad she's leaving," Jason said as they went up the back stairs. "She's not that sad or she wouldn't go," William said. "I don't want to talk about her, Jason." Okay, sorry." They dumped their backpacks in William's room and headed down the hall. "What's the cookie for?" Jason asked. "What cookie?" "The one you hid in your pocket?" "Oh, that." William opened the attic door. "I leave one up in the castle for a snack. Sometimes I sneak up here after bedtime." He banged on the wall 3 times. "Why are you doing that?" Jason asked. "The light doesn't always go on at once. Banging on the wall seems to help," he said as he flipped the switch. "What's with all these questions?" But Jason didn't answer. He had vaulted up the top 3 steps ahead of William and was already staring at the castle. "I never thought it would be so big," he said as he walked all the way around it. "Show me how the drawbridge works." William moved slowly to pull the lever, giving the Silver Knight as much time as possible to hide. He thought he saw something moving in the stable, but Jason didn't seem to notice. William moved slowly to pull the lever, giving the Silver Knight as much time as possible to hide. He thought he saw something moving in the stable, but Jason didn't seem to notice. "You pull this chain here to raise the metal grating," he said. Jason tried it a couple of times. William sat back and let him explore the castle on his own. He was hoping Jason would finish quickly so that he could get on with his bug search, but Jason was settling in for the afternoon. "Where are all the soldiers?" he asked. "It didn't come with any," William lied. "A castle isn't much fun without knights. Maybe we could pool our money and buy some." "Sure," said William, but he knew he didn't sound very enthusiastic. He didn't want Jason around every afternoon, or he wouldn't have any time alone with the Silver Knight. He stood up. "We'd better go down now. I've got a lot of homework to do." "Aw, come on, I just got here," Jason said. They looked at each other. "You act as if you really don't want me around." William didn't answer for a moment. He wanted to explain everything, but he couldn't tell about the Silver Knight, and he was tired of lying. "It sounds stupid," he said at last, "but I just want to be alone." "All right," said Jason as he started down the stairs. "I guess I understand. Bye, William." "Bye." He knew that Jason was hurt. "It's all Mrs. Phillips' fault," he thought. "I wouldn't feel this way if she hadn't decided to leave." He stood up. "You can come out now," William called to Sir Simon as he rummaged around in a trunk for a small cardboard box. Something moved behind the stable door, and the small knight appeared. "You didn't give me much warning," he shouted up at William. "Sorry," William said. "I didn't know Jason would run up the stairs so fast. I've got to go now. It'll be dark soon and I want to find a bug so we can test the token. I found a cardboard box to keep it in." "I hate to trouble you further, William, but might you have something to eat?" "Oh, I almost forgot. I brought you a cookie," William said, digging down into his pocket. "It's mostly crumbs now, but that makes it perfect for you. Be back later," he called from the bottom of the steps. "Jason left quickly," Mrs. Phillips said as he joined her in the flower bed. "He had to go home," William said. "Have you seen any bugs around here? I need one for my science class." She handed him the trowel. "Help yourself. All sorts of things are feeling the spring and stirring around." It was a warm afternoon for April. They worked side by side in silence. William found 2 sow bugs and put them in the cardboard box with some dirt and a couple of leaves. Then he worked on the flower bed with her. "Have you been playing with the Silver Knight?" she asked after a long silence. He didn't lift his head or answer for a minute. He hadn't thought yet whether he should tell her about Sir Simon. "Yes," he said. "He told me a very long story yesterday about where he came from." Mrs. Phillips smiled. "Did he now? He never talked to me all those years I played with him. There was that legend about him. Maybe it's the same one the Silver Knight told you." William shrugged. "Maybe," he said. She wasn't taking him seriously. "Oh, there's that gray cat from next door," she said. "Chase it away, will you, William? Every time it gets close, I start to sneeze." By the time he got back, she had gathered up the gardening tools and gone inside. They said no more about the Silver Knight. Okay, so chapters 4 and 5 were a lot of information. Chapter 4 particularly told us a lot about the Silver Knight, or Sir Simon's background, how he came to be turned to lead, how he found his way into William's castle. Pretty interesting stuff. And I am curious to see what will happen with Alistair's spell as the story goes on. Now, for summer reading, we have a secret code word that you can earn that's worth 30 bonus points toward your summer account. Today, to earn that 30 points, we just ask you to make a prediction in the comments. What do you think will happen with the castle? So, do you think that William will help Sir Simon find a way to break the spell? So do you think that the token will work if they try it on a living creature, even though it didn't work on the other items they tried? And do you think that William will figure out a way to make Mrs. Phillips stay? So share your answers and your predictions in the comments to get that secret code. And don't forget that you can subscribe to us on YouTube to catch the first 3 chapters of this book and our previous episodes in Tween Storytime. Just search for Alexander Hamilton Memorial Free Library. So thanks for joining us today for another episode. We hope that we'll see you next week as we continue with Castle in the Attic.